Hello, Earthlings, and welcome back to our Bible study. We are in Proverbs chapter 22 today, and of course, you can download our PDF on our website at tobelikechrist.com. I got a message saying that my Proverbs 10 study still wasn't working, and so I will try to fix that one again today. I thought I had fixed it, but apparently not. Okay, Proverbs 22. As far as our outline of the book of Proverbs, we are in our second section, the Proverbs of Solomon, and we're going to be here for another 7 chapters or so, all the way through chapter 29. Let's take a look at 3 words and define them. We've seen 2 of these already. Scoffer. A scoffer is a mocker, someone who makes fun of something or somebody. A sluggard. This is a lazy person who's slow to do their work. And then we have a new one in verse 28. Ancient landmarks. These were markers that indicated property rights. A landmark may have been set at the end of a man's field to mark where his property ended and where his neighbors began. For more on that, you can look back at some of the books of Moses. Deuteronomy 19, verse 14 mentions these landmarks. I do want to go over our interpretive principle again because we're specifically going to mention it in one of the Proverbs we look at today. So as you read through the book of Proverbs, it's important to keep in mind that the Proverbs discuss principles, not necessarily promises. The wise statements of Proverbs are general truths, not absolute rules. Our little man here at the bottom is meditating on a proverb that kind of relates to one that we talked about yesterday. We talked about how the diligent, those who work slowly and steadily and build quality things, that their work will last. This chapter mentions something similar. It says, "Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before the obscure men." A man who does quality work, his work's going to be recognized versus somebody who's just building hastily and sloppily. On our second page today, I've got 4 proverbs to highlight, and the first one comes from verse 1. I always feel like I get halfway through the chapter and I've already found my proverbs that I want to highlight, and then I get to the end and I'm like, oh, I want to use that one too. I want to use that one. Maybe I should not use the first verse every day, but oh well, I did it again. Proverbs 22:1 reads, "A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver or gold." It's better to have an honorable name than to have riches and be known as a crooked person. It's better to have the favor of God and men than to have a pile of gold without it. Don't trade your reputation for anything. If you become known as a scoundrel, it's going to be hard to change people's perception of you. You want your name to be respected, to be honorable, so that God will be glorified through your life. If you're known as a no-good, rotten person who swindles people and takes advantage of people, it's going to be hard to do that. Proverb number 2 now. This is one we've made mention of before. It's in verse 6. "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." So children that are raised to be wise and virtuous and God-fearing and respectful and righteous will carry those virtues into their adult life. The upbringing of a child has a huge impact on the person that they become in the future. I think almost any parent knows this, or at least they should know it, so that they parent well. Children that are raised to love God will love Him until they have children of their own, and then they'll teach their children to love God. Now you might be thinking, maybe you had a child who you think you raised well, and maybe they kind of went off the deep end, or maybe you know somebody else who was a really good parent, tried their best, but their child, went off and did their own thing and maybe fell into sin and evil and doesn't hold to the virtues that their parents taught them. This verse, this proverb, is a good example of where our interpretive principle is really important. So it's an excellent example to reinforce the importance of the interpretive principle on page 1. It is generally true that if a child is raised to be virtuous, they will grow into a virtuous adult. It is generally true, it occurs more often than not. Your child certainly has a better chance of becoming a virtuous person if they're raised in a virtuous way. But of course, it's not an absolute guarantee. Proverb number 3 for today comes from verse 7. "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender." Rich people have an advantage over less wealthy people. Those who lend money have a lot of power over those who borrow money from them. So it's generally wise to avoid going into debt. And I know that's hard, especially for the American culture where I'm from, where it's just kind of part of life. And certainly I haven't always been the best at this, but Solomon here teaches us it's generally wise to avoid going into debt or taking on debt. As servants of God, we want to be free to serve God with as much of our time and our money and energy as possible. But if we have outstanding debts, we have to spend some of our time, energy, and money serving our lender. Avoiding debt is ideal because we don't want to be beholden to any man or any institution. I've met a lot of people, well, I wouldn't say a lot. I've met some people who they want to go do mission work, or they want to take a job that doesn't have as good a pay because they feel like it's a more meaningful job, but they can't because they have a lot of debt, maybe from college or some other things, and they say, I got to keep this good paying job because I've got to pay back these debts. And so it kind of hinders them from doing what they really want to do and serving in the ways that they want to serve. So that's just something to think about. Maybe you're an older person who's already taken on that debt and you've learned this lesson, but hopefully some younger people will take this advice and get it in their heads early, and then they'll be freer to serve the Lord in a lot of ways moving forward in their future life if they take this wisdom and apply it. And now proverb number 4. This one's kind of a bit of a funny one. I think there's some satire here in verse 13, but there's a good lesson that we need to learn from it. The sluggard says, there's a lion outside. I shall be killed in the streets. I think what's going on here is that there's this lazy man, and this lazy man is a master of coming up with excuses as to why he can't go out and work, why he has to stay in his house. In this case, maybe somebody spotted a lion in the countryside. Maybe this lion is like 15, 20 miles away or something. But the lazy man says, oh man, I can't go to work today. I might be killed in the streets by a lion. He uses these excuses, no matter how ridiculous they are, to avoid having to do anything. The application for us is be a hardworking person, not somebody who's going to do anything they can to get out of work. Your community will see through these kinds of bad excuses. They're not fooled. Smart people aren't fooled by these kinds of excuses, and they're not going to respect you if you take every opportunity to get out of doing anything. You'll meet people like this sometimes in the church, even people who they just kind of want to do the bare minimum. If they're ever asked to do anything, they've always got some reason why they can't. It's like, you're not fooling anybody, right? You hopefully you're not even fooling yourself. You know when you're making bad excuses, and other people know when you're making bad excuses. And you don't want to be characterized with this man who's sitting in his house for fear of the 0.0001% chance that he could be killed by a lion in the city street. That will finish us up for our study today. We've got a nice variety of applications there that we can try to apply into our daily lives. It'd be interesting. I was thinking to take like 10 proverbs maybe like every year and try to implement them into your life. And then the next year take another 5 or another 10, another 5, another 10, until you become, this kind of individual, this wise man that Solomon's talking about here. It's really hard to apply them all at one time, right? There's so many of them. It's hard to overhaul our lives overnight. But what if you took 5, worked on those this year, 5 more the next year? You think about it, you'd become a picture of the man that or woman that Solomon is describing here in the Proverbs. I think I might have to think about some kind of way to implement that in this year, hopefully, and maybe in the years to come. I'll give that some thought. Maybe I can come up with a framework or an outline of an easy way to track that and do that. All right, Lord willing, we will be back to talk about chapter 23 tomorrow. Until then, I hope everyone has a great day.